We have new information on one of the largest cyber attacks to ever hit the United States government.
Someone has stolen personal records of up to
4 million former and current American government employees.
Officials are pointing fingers at China.
This morning, China's government says allegations that Chinese hackers carried out the attack are irresponsible.
Chinese officials deny any involvement.
So that's where we left things off. A huge story breaking late last week. Great place to start our roundtable on this massive hack. Please welcome in President of Citizens for Self-Governance, Attorney Mark Meckler. And joining Miranda and I is former Assistant Director to the FBI and President of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, Ron Hosko. Thank you both for being with us.
Happy to be with you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Ron, let's start with you. President Obama talking about this recent cyber attack at today's culmination of the G7 summit. And after one of the biggest security breaches in U.S. history, this is what he had to say.
Part of the problem is that we've got very old systems. What we are doing is going agency by agency and figuring out what can we fix with better practices and better computer hygiene by personnel.
Better computer hygiene, not saying, look, whoever did this to us is going to pay, and not a very robust defense. Doesn't leave a lot of Americans feeling very secure. Ron, when is the United States really going to muscle up here and face this problem head on?
It should not leave us feeling particularly secure or confident. This has been going on for years, and we are really going to need to invest in infrastructure protection across the federal domain, across our critical infrastructure in the United States. The Chinese are picking our pockets. They are stealing us blind.
Mark, why is it taking so long? I was talking to John during the commercial break, and I've done so many identity theft stories for years that I can't do another one. And we're sitting there looking at each other going, yeah, me too. Why? I mean, now the problem just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. Why isn't more being done? We've known about this forever.
Well, I mean, one thing to remember, and Ron can speak to this even more cogently than I, a lot of the stuff that we are doing behind the scenes to protect ourselves is not generally known to the American public. It can't be known. These are security secrets that can't be talked about widely publicly. The question I have is more of a foreign policy question. We do know it's the Chinese doing it. It's absurd when they say that it's not. And so the question is, where's our bluster? Where are we saying that the people who are doing this will pay for it? Where is our counterattack? And again, some of that can't be talked about. But from a posture perspective, what I don't like is you'd never see these days America taking a muscular foreign posture stance. And that's what we need to hear from President Obama. The people who are doing this will pay the price. We will respond in kind. We will take down their systems. That's the kind of thing that I think Americans want to hear to feel confident.
Well, you hear this from members of Congress all the time. They debated these cybersecurity bills, and many of them will tell you, quite frankly, it's going to take a major hack before that Congress really has the political will to get something done. If this doesn't constitute a major attack, I don't know really what does, Ron.
Right.
I agree with you. We see major attack after major attack. In many of those cases, we put attribution on the Chinese, and still we are waiting for the next attack. And the fear is, the volume of information that enables the Chinese to target Americans, to exploit them individually further, and to exploit additional systems. And until we muscle up and do something affirmative, we're going to see more.
Do you think the delay just has to do with money? Mark, I'll direct that to you. Do you think that's why we haven't seen more done?
I actually think during this administration, the delay, or at least the postural delay, is philosophical. This is an administration that has a philosophy, a foreign policy philosophy of retreat. The idea is we should be smaller, less threatening, less involved in world affairs, less able to defend ourselves, less able to project our force. And I would argue that goes into the area of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not strictly defensive. It requires an offensive capability, and it requires the American people to support that, and we do not have an administration that's making the case for that today.
Well, we often think of these cyber attacks, maybe someone's going to empty out your ATM machine. That's one concern here. But these guys were going after the security clearances of government officials here. Right. Ron, do you think that the Chinese are looking for possible spies within our own government, trying to get information out of them?
I definitely think they are looking for opportunities within our government, within those who know. And I also think they're making themselves smarter and stealing intellectual property on how our systems work. Because if they can pay a few dollars to steal our system and use it there, they can potentially save themselves hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in building a system themselves. So it's cheaper to steal from us, like a stealth bomber or stealth fighter, than it is to build it from scratch yourself.
All right, Ron and Mark, we're going to ask you to stick around for part 2 of our roundtable. Thanks so much for staying with us.
We're going to talk about this prison break in New York and how that could actually happen. But you know what Ron and Mark were just talking about there, these Chinese knockoffs. You look at their fighter plane, their new fighter plane, looks just like our F-35. It's the same thing as your fake Gucci purse or any other fake Chinese items.
Right.
Clearly, they're
stealing information. We've known about it for quite some time, and we're not doing enough about it.
Quite frankly,
Yeah.
Miranda Khan for president, everybody.
There
We're
you
back
go.
with more coming up. Mark Meckler and Ron Hosko will be joining us right after this.
And welcome back for part 2 of our roundtable. President of Citizens for Self-Governance, Attorney Mark Meckler, rejoins us, along with former Assistant Director to the FBI and President of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, Ron Hosko. Thanks so much for sticking around. All right, let's talk about these two men, David Sweat and Richard Matt. Now, they're on the loose after cutting their way out of the maximum security Clinton Correctional Facility and the Adirondacks.
These are very dangerous individuals. The state police ask that the public take no chances, make no efforts to apprehend them, and report any suspicious activity. If you see something, say something.
Well, if you haven't heard, somehow the two prisoners were able to get a hold of some power tools and cut their way through steel walls and pipes to make their escape 2 days ago. They left dummies in their beds to fold guards, and a $100,000 reward is now being offered for any information. I have to say, Ron, I am just kind of dumbfounded, as I'm sure everybody is. How does something like this even happen? And supposedly one of these guys had gotten loose before.
Right, so this is an incredibly dangerous situation for everyone. These two individuals have no reason at all to surrender or to go back behind those prison walls. So very dangerous for the public, very dangerous for law enforcement. How it happens, is this a breach of integrity? Did they co-opt a guard or guards or workers at the prison? You know, one of the things that I think has some parallels to our cyber conversation is you have a prison that has a very aging infrastructure, and that means systems are breaking down and you need repair constantly. And one commodity that's on the side of these two prisoners, of all prisoners, is time. They clearly had the time to look, to evaluate, to figure out weaknesses, whether that's people weaknesses or structural weaknesses or both, and exploit them. Very dangerous situation.
We look at this conversation in a broader context here. You talk about the decaying infrastructure of these prisons, but also at the same time, we see U.S. prison populations at an all-time high, and taxpayers simply do not want to pay for new prisons to house these people. So when you look at this, Mark, is this part of the broader conversation we talk about criminal justice reform that we need to be having? I mean, is this symptomatic, or maybe I'm drawing conclusions that don't really exist?
You know, from my perspective, I don't see it as symptomatic. This is clearly an inside job. It's impossible for these inmates to have gotten a hold of power tools without somebody inside providing with the power tools. I was thinking about this story. I've been inside prisons. I've toured prisons. My mom's a former correctional officer. There are places that are really loud. It's amazing to me these guys could be using power tools in an echoing environment like that. Nobody knows. They clearly had maps of behind the walls, inside the infrastructure of the prison. So I don't think this is so much about decaying infrastructure as decaying personnel. You have a personnel problem inside that prison. I'm sure they're going to dig deep. They're going to find out who was involved, and that's going to be the bottom of this story.
Ron, there's thoughts that they may have gone to Canada, may have some ties to Mexico. What do you think the chances are that we actually capture these guys?
Well, I think those chances are good because always these folks need a network to help them, and that network is, you know, very likely family members. So the police, New York State Police and others will be going back over their logs of contacts, recorded calls, and trying to evaluate that to see, are there coded messages? Are there plain text messages? What does this network look like, and how do we do it? And their pictures will help too. If you remember the Texas 7 15 years ago. They were caught in the Four Corners area. Social media and the media helped a great deal in identifying those folks and bringing them back to justice.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been that long since the Texas 7 were able to break out like that. Everybody remembers that case and how that one ended. And again, you mentioned, Ron, the aspect of social media involved here in a completely new landscape, though, when it comes. Is it more difficult for law enforcement because there is so much for them to sort through here, or do you think that will actually be a help in this case because there's so much electronic communication going on nowadays?
Yeah, I think it will help them in this case. It helps get the word out. It helps get their images out. And their inside network of contacts, their closest friends, are a good starting point for law enforcement. Those who came to visit them at the prison, there is a starting point here. And that's all while the investigation also looks at the guard force and the workers at that prison.
Well, we'll have to see what happens. I really do hope they catch them, but I'm sure they're going to be interviewing some of those people working at the prison very much
doing that
so
right
the next 3 days.
I'm
All right.
sure. Mark Meckler, thanks so much for being with us. Also, Ron Hosko,
Thank
former
you.
Deputy Director to the FBI. Great having you with us. Fascinating conversation, cybersecurity and prison security, all in the same conversation. We try to cover a wide range of topics.
Right.
We'll have you both back again real soon for another chat.
Great.
Thanks.
Guys.
All right, we got more to discuss when it comes to this Chinese cyber attack. We're going to be joined by Stephen Weissman coming right up, who's
Always
an
good to
expert
have
on the
him.
matters. How exactly were these Chinese hackers able to infiltrate the federal mainframe, get in there and get to those personnel files? Very concerning stuff.
Interesting to hear his thoughts on that. He always has good advice, too. Maybe they should listen to him. Maybe they should hire him. All right, more to come. You're watching Newsmax now.